Hi, this is Kogito, and welcome to another Through the Ages video. In this video, I will be covering the first round of my 2026 Australian Open. So for those of you who aren't aware, the Australian Open is an annual tennis tournament that, well, that's true. But this is, of course, about the Through the Ages Australian Open, which the name is based off of the tennis Australian Open. I think that might be the only thing it takes from it, other than being an annual competition, of course. But it is an annual competition that starts the same day that the Australian Open tennis tournament starts. But in Through the Ages, it is a tournament with 256 players, with a pretty interesting format. Each round, you play a single 4-player game. If you finish first or second in that 4-player game, you move on to the next round. If you finish third or fourth, you are eliminated. So, in that sense, it's a pretty high variance tournament, because, you know, one game, anything that can happen historically, and I think this year too, a lot of top players have actually dropped out in the first round of the Australian Open, so it's definitely not a tournament you can take lightly, even starting from the first round. I did play in the Australian Open last year. That was the first year I played the Australian Open. I did pretty well. I managed to make it to stage 5. You can see there were 16 players left, so round of 16, not bad. That's the quarterfinals, right? I did finish 4th this game. Unfortunately, I dropped out. Interestingly, in all of my previous 4 rounds, I finished second in every single one of them. So I technically never won a game in the Australian Open. I just always managed to finish second to move on. Now, in round 4, I was kind of helped. One of my opponents resigned early, and the other opponent timed out, so I almost, like, moved on by default from that round. But yeah, and then I ended up getting last in round 5. So this year, I am hoping to improve that result, hopefully getting to at least round 6, if not the finals. We'll see how it goes. But of course, in order to do that, I will need to start. Another thing I wanted to mention. This tournament is pretty prestigious. There's a lot of very strong players, including all of the past 3 world champions. There's the reigning world champion, A440, the world champion from the previous year, Martin Pescher, he's here, and the world champion of the year before that, Weidenbaum. So all three of those are here in this game, along with several other top players, such as Sven, Zadok, and a lot of others that I'm not going to go through. But yeah, definitely a lot of really challenging competition in this tournament. So yeah, it's an interesting tournament. But every tournament must start with round 1. And in round 1, I will be playing against Dragonite, Foang, and Vegeta 4791. Now, all 3 of my opponents do have a lower Glico rating than I do, as you can see. But again, in the Australian Open, you can never count on that, because it's just one game. And I think they're all, we'll see in the game too, they're all strong players. None of them make, like, huge mistakes or anything like that. Vegeta is, of course, the lowest ranked player. In fact, quite low ranked. As we can see, Australian Open is first come, first serve, so there's no, like, Glico rating requirement or anything like that. That being said, though, I do think that Vegeta's rating somewhat belied their skill in this game. And definitely, you know, the other 2 players both have respectable ratings. So even though I am favored in this game, it's, you know, there's only so much that gets you, which is not very far, right? Like I said, there have been a lot of very strong players have been eliminated in round 1 in the past. I do not want to be one of them. So without further ado, let's take a look. By the way, I do want to say that I'm kind of tired right now, so if I'm a little slow to say certain things or miss certain things or whatever, that's definitely the only reason why. So, with that out of the way, let's take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. So in this deck, we can see in H3 a little bit of Theater Synergy, Chapman Hollywood, but that's about it. Not really Theater split in H2, other than Gotti, kind of Darwin, but not really. So, especially in a 4-player game, I don't think theaters are a way to go, particularly in this deck. There are a lot of lab synergy leaders with Steve Jobs, Albert Einstein, Sid Meier, Marie Curie to a lesser extent. However, there aren't the 2 major lab payoffs in either Manhattan Project or Spaceflight. There is an internet, though, which kind of pays off with the lab somewhat, as well as a Red Cross that pairs well with this ocean liner service. There's also Churchill with Gandhi, though, so kind of 2 clashing, you know, whether pushing military might be good or not. In H2, like I said, there's the Ocean Liner service as well as Maria, powerful combo. There's also the Railroad James Watt combo. So 2 potentially powerful combos if you could get them going. Those are the 2 major ones. Statue of Liberty is a pretty good wonder, also useful with Maria Theresa, for example. However, the presence of James Watt without Newton also means that alchemies, going from alchemies to coals is better than it normally is. There's also 3 military action leaders, notably, so getting a 3rd military action age 1 a bit less important. Also makes Republic better, so getting an age 1 government is somewhat less viable. In age 1, I would say most of these leaders are fine with being elected early, except Gutenberg, kinda Barbarossa, Michelangelo, although they can also be fine depending on the situation. So it's definitely fine to get a more transitional age A leader who you don't have for very long. As for the age 1 wonders, they're alright. They're kinda not great. You have definitely, I would say, probably the 3 worst ones here in Taj Mahal, St. Peter's Basilica, and Machu Picchu. Of course, they can also be good depending on context, but along with the H2 wonders, also, but along with, like I said previously, there being James Watt here, definitely going alchemy into coal is very strongly supported in this deck. So not getting an iron is very acceptable here. As for my turn, I think it's these yellow cards aren't so good, so it's really between Stonehenge or one of these AJ leaders. And it was a pretty easy pick for me to Stonehenge. We don't have a great set of AJ wonders in this deck either. We don't have the 3 major power, we don't have Pyramids or Library of Alexandria. Colossus is good in a 4-player game. There isn't a Suez with it though. The age 1 military leaders, I mean, you have Ziska and Barbarossa, so there's definitely potential for military pressure here along with the Joan of Arc. So Colossus can definitely be helpful in this deck, even without Suez, don't get me wrong. That being said, obviously I can't take Colossus. The chances are pretty reasonable. One of Foang or Vegeta might take it, so I definitely can't depend on it. And aside from Colossus, I would say Stonehenge is definitely the best wonder. I personally like Stonehenge a fair amount. I think it's probably better than Colossus even in itself. And like I said, because I think neither of these AJ leaders are too exciting, and I would rather wait for one of these. I should be able to get, I think, at least one of these leaders. Homer, not as great with Stonehenge, but I at least leave myself open for either Boudica or Confucius. And, you know, even if I don't take one of these this turn, even if Boudica and Confucius are taken, I can still take one of these next turn. So I think it's definitely right to take Stonehenge here. Dragonite doesn't take Boudica, instead takes Hippocrates and Frugality. I would probably take Boudica. I think she's very strong in this deck. But the Frugality is also potentially useful, even though I think it's a lower value AJ yellow card. But if you value Hippocrates highly, this makes sense. Foang also doesn't take Boudica, instead takes a Shotgun Richland. I think that is justifiable. However, I do disagree with this Richland here for the reason that next turn Foang probably wants to elect Ashoka and build a mine, but that means that this Richland is going to be gone. I think taking the Urban Growth would be better, because this will stay in your hand longer, probably, meaning it's more likely to get the Ashoka bonus with this Urban Growth than with this Richland, and it obviously saves the same amount of rocks, so I think that the Urban Growth would be long-term more rocks than this Richland with Ashoka. Sorry. Vegeta takes Colosseum over Colossus. Interesting pick. I disagree with it, but, you know, I can understand. Colosseum is at its best in a 4-player game, and there's no Suez for Colossus. Not a lot of colonization synergy in general, except for Isabella. So I do understand in that sense. Luckily for me, though, none of my opponents actually took Boudica. And I think especially since she's once of action cheaper, I actually think in a 4-player game, when probably none of your opponents are going to have a strength leader, except maybe one of them will have Caesar. But especially in a 4-player game, I think Boudica is actually better than Confucius. Not only is she a lot more flexible, you don't have to seed with her, you can choose rocks or food if you want, but the military resources for her can also be extremely valuable in a 4-player game. So very happy to get her for one civil action here. Otherwise, I just do normal things, increase my population, build a mine. I draw a heavy cavalry tactic. I do think Boudica makes this easier to get, thanks to a military resource bonus, as well as a rebellion. Dragonite elects Hippocrates, takes the Colossus, makes sense, and otherwise does normal stuff. Foang takes the engineering genus, builds a mine, increases the population, and notably takes a second Richland instead of electing Ashoka. It is true that electing Ashoka this turn would not give Foang any extra resources. However, Foang will have to elect Ashoka next turn anyway, and so what Foing is doing here is just spending one civil action on Richland A. I think this is a very low value card to take for one civil action. You basically, aside from the Engineering Genius, you basically only take AJ yellow cards when you literally have nothing else you can do. So in Foing's situation, where they can elect Ashoka instead, I think it definitely would have been better to elect Ashoka, especially since they already have that yellow card in hand for Ashoka. Vegeta, interestingly, chooses Caesar over Confucius. It is true that, you know, Confucius, when playing 4th in a 4-player game, can be a little scary. You have to focus on your military more harder when you're playing 4th. However, none of the opponents have a military-focused leader, really, so there's not an immediate threat looking here. In addition, the extra military action from Caesar, I mean, it'll be a little while before Vegeta can complete Colosseum, but it's still somewhat of a clash to get, you know, a military action from both the Wonder and from Caesar. So I think I still probably would have taken Confucius here. You know, if several of the opponents had like Sun Tzu, for example, like if Dragonite had Sun Tzu with the Colossus, then I could understand Caesar more. But I think in this situation, Confucius would be better, even if he's a little riskier. Anyway, as for me, I seed the rebellion. I, you know, don't have corruption issues this turn. I have a happy face Wonder. I think, yeah, Vegeta and I are the only players with... Well, I guess Foing will be taking the Hang Gunners, but at least Dragonite doesn't have a happy face Wonder. And obviously, I know it's in the deck, so I can play around it. So, you'll note that I actually take the Rock with Boudica. I'll talk about that after my turn to explain why I did that. But first, let's talk about this turn. There are definitely several options for this turn. The Engineering Genius is a high-value card. Joan of Arc is an early leader. However, I figured I don't really need an Age 1 leader yet. Boudica, I feel, is a very strong leader that I can keep for pretty much all of Age A. So I didn't really feel the need to take Joan here. The Stonehenge also makes it easier for me to get a third military action through technology. Especially since I have, I think, a powerful turn to do instead, which is to get this extremely early irrigation upgrade. This, I think, is a strong irrigation deck in general. We have Machu Picchu, we have Barbarossa, we have Ocean Liner Service, we have Ziska. Basically, all of the irrigation synergy, even Statue of Liberty, basically all of the irrigation synergy there could be in the deck is here. There's James Watt as a little bit of anti-synergy, but I think that's definitely not as relevant as all the synergy there is in the deck. In addition, I think getting the irrigation this turn is very powerful, getting these food upgrades early, and then especially since I have this heavy cavalry tactic, which, you know, you kind of need extra food. Well, you don't need it, but it's very helpful to have extra food production in order to get this going. So for all of those reasons stated, I think irrigation is actually, like, a really strong card. I wouldn't say it's, like, better. Well, actually, I guess I could have... Yeah, I could have played Iron, too. So an early Iron also would have been very strong, obviously. But I think this early irrigation is actually very strong in this deck, so I was willing to pay 2 civil actions to get it going right now. But for that reason, you can see the reason I took this Rock instead of, say, a Science is because next turn I can potentially take another Rock and just finish Stonehenge. I think that was the major reason I did it. I mean, there's a few other potential benefits, you know, but yeah, I think that's definitely the major reason, just giving me the option to finish Stonehenge next turn. Obviously, I seeded the Rebellion, meaning I will want to get the Stonehenge finished pretty quickly so that I'm able to not be hit by the Rebellion. And just in general, you know, the first event that was revealed was the development of science. I'm going to have a lot of extra science from the Stonehenge. Even though I am delaying my lab this turn, I still felt pretty comfortable in terms of my science production, whereas I definitely will need a lot of rocks, you know, to finish Stonehenge, to get these upgrades in, to get the heavy cavalry, even with the Boudica savings. So for those two reasons, those were the two reasons that I picked the extra rock this turn. I drew a bonus card and a Wealthy Territory. Dragonite does take Joan as well as the Engineering Genius, the 2 strong cards I mentioned that I passed up. And delays the lab so that they have an open population for development, instead just builds 1 stage of Colossus. Following Seeds reveals the development of planning. The options are trade routes, religion, and crafts. So Dragonite kind of rewarded for leaving an open population, although, you know, passing up development of religion was part of development of planning isn't too bad. but obviously still nice to have that option at least. Following increases the population, elects Ashoka, takes the Hanging Gardens as well as the printing press. Not really particularly strong printing press game. Well, there's Leonardo and Darwin, and Gotti, so there's decent printing press synergy. But obviously the main reason to take this printing press is for the Ashoka bonus. We can see here, though, the weakness of Foeng's last turn. If Foeng hadn't taken this rich land and instead elected Ashoka, they would have an extra civil action this turn that they could have used to take this urban growth, which would have given them one more rock than the rich land. So Foeng essentially lost one rock by taking the rich land instead of electing Ashoka last turn. Vegeta Seeds reveals the development of markets. Vegeta Seeds again, revealing a development of settlement. There being Julius Caesar in the game is probably another reason that Dragonite and I both wanted to keep a free population open, because there's going to be more cards seeded. Vegeta takes the development of religion, as did Foeng, which makes sense. Vegeta builds a lab and a stage of Colosseum, and interestingly takes Michelangelo. Michelangelo, I think, is a good leader, and, obviously franchises a little bit with the Colosseum's happy face. Now, Michelangelo is a leader that depends pretty heavily on iron production. Vegeta obviously doesn't have the iron. Now, there are 3 copies, none of them have been revealed yet, so Vegeta is more likely than not to get the iron. It's still something of a risk. I guess my more significant issue with Michelangelo is, again, the wonders available in this deck aren't the best, either in Age 1 or Age 2. There are some good ones, but it could definitely be a better set. Now, admittedly, there are the 2 rock production wonders, Machu Picchu and Railroad, both of which are the best with Michelangelo because they let you cycle through wonders even more. So, in that sense, there is some Michelangelo synergy, but it's still not a great Michelangelo game, and like I said, he's kind of speculative. He's at his... Actually, I'm not sure it's correct to say he's at his Western 4 player. Yeah, I don't think that's correct. I think he's kind of equally good on all player counts because the major reason to take him is the civil action saving and wonders. I think it's just kind of, taking him from 2 civil actions, kind of speculative. I think maybe alchemy plus urban growth, or maybe alchemy plus play cultural heritage, preparing for alchemy upgrades next turn. Unfortunately, Vegeta was, 1 rock short of building an alchemy directly. But Vegeta this turn, instead of doing this, could have, for example, taken alchemy, played it, upgraded 1 alchemy. So instead of building the lab, so here's a play Vegeta could have done. Take alchemy, play it, upgrade it, instead of building a lab. So Vegeta would have had the same amount of science income, but would have still only had 1 lab. That would have spent 3 rocks and not built the stage of the Colosseum. So next turn they would have 5, and then take this urban growth. Take this urban growth. That would have let Vegeta then next turn build an alchemy directly, no matter what's in the event deck. I think that would have been pretty strong. I mean, the event deck is going to flip soon, but none of us are necessarily. I mean, Dragonite can get more strength with the Shogun Colossus, but I don't think Vegeta is really in a position where they need to worry about strength next turn necessarily. So I think getting those alchemy upgrades going this turn and preparing to build an alchemy directly. I think when you can build an alchemy directly, that's very strong because it saves a civil action in H1 where civil actions are really tight. So that's probably what I would have done if I were Vegeta. Now it's my turn. I don't see the wealthy territory because, as we'll see, on my turn I am going to be just out of corruption, so I didn't want to reveal a resource event. For the same reason, and also because it's just the best one in a vacuum, I take the development of religion from planning, and I also take rocks from markets, because I have irrigation, so I figured the extra food was less necessary. As for my turn, I'm actually going to do what I just said I would have done if I were Vegeta, which is build 1 stage of the Stonehenge. We can see the one reason I like Stonehenge so much, it gives you a lot of extra flexibility in these early turns. If you need just 1 or 2 more extra science, whatever you want to do, you can get it with Stonehenge. So I really like that flexibility. This, along with taking the rocks from market, we can see I was left with 7. So actually I have enough rocks both to build 1 stage of Stonehenge and to build an alchemy directly. As I just said, I think building an alchemy directly is extremely strong if you can do it, because it saves a civil action. So when you have the ability to do a play like this, building an alchemy directly, I think you need a very good reason not to. I didn't really see a good reason not to. The event deck hasn't flipped yet. you know, my opponents could definitely push a fair amount of strength this turn if they really wanted to, but also I have I'll have free resources from Boudica. I'll be able to increase my population 2 times next turn, so I can potentially, you know, build like 2 warriors if I have to, something like that. Now, it is true that the downside of this play is I'm passing up both of these swordsmen, which are the 2 military attacks on the road. They'll almost certainly be gone by my next turn. So maybe if my opponents push a bunch of strength, I might start, that message appeared, I think, because they just started maintenance. But if my opponents start putting a lot of strength, then I might struggle a little bit. But also, obviously, my tactic is heavy cavalry, so I don't really want the swordsman in the first place. You know, maybe I'll draw an infantry tactic, but I don't know that. So I'm kind of waiting for knights regardless. Hopefully, kind of need them to appear relatively soon. Hopefully, we'll see how it goes. But for those reasons, I thought it was okay to pass up swordsmen. And again, just this is such a strong play when you can do it. I admit, though, it is a little bit risky to focus so much on my economy this turn when the event deck's about to flip. We'll see if that works out for me. I didn't play the heavy cavalry. I think I was afraid of, if I played it, maybe one of my opponents would take the knights. Like, I really, you know, needed to take the first, you know, a copy of knights whenever it appeared. So I think that's the reason I didn't play heavy cavalry. Maybe maybe I should have, though. I mean, there's no Genghis in the deck, so probably none of my opponents are really in a position to go after heavy cavalry that much. Maybe they are. I don't know. But that's why I didn't play it. Maybe I was also just looking for extra draws. And also, the wealthy territory, you know, I wasn't sure if I would really necessarily be in a position to bid a lot for the wealthy territory. But I think in retrospect, I probably still should have kept it and played the heavy cavalry. Regardless, though, at least I did end up drawing 2 events, so that was fortunate. I drew the historic territory and the pestilence. Dragonite Seeds, revealing development of civil life. Dragonite finishes the Colossus with Engineering Genius, plays Joan, and builds a Swordsman, so Dragonite is able to go up to 6 strength this turn, which is a relatively... You know, I mean, it's somewhat threatening, right? I'll definitely need to respond in some fashion. Fowang takes the second copy of Swordsman, builds 1, and 2 Stitches of the Hanging Gardens. So Fowang is able to defend against Dragonite as long as they have a bonus card. Unfortunately, Fowang still isn't getting the full Ashoka bonus. Vegeta offers the Open Borders Agreement to me. This was obviously quite good for me. It'll make it a lot easier for me to make sure I defend against Dragonite. I'm only going to need 1 more strength this turn in order to do it, in fact. I think, as we'll see, I would have been able to defend against Dragonite anyway, but obviously it's just, in general, fortunate to get this agreement offered to me. I guess it makes sense that it was offered to me. You know, Dragonite's pretty strong. Maybe Fowang looked, definitely in this position, right? It probably looks like Fowang is going to be able to threaten more strength quicker than me. So I understand why Vegeta offered it to me. Anyway, Vegeta builds on the warrior, plays the fighting band to go up to 4 strength and the cultural heritage, then takes the patriotism and the burden sicknesses. It is true that the card row doesn't have a lot of great cards on it for Vegeta to take, so this play is understandable. It's my turn. I don't seed again, as we'll see. Didn't want to reveal a resource event. And I also didn't necessarily want to get the event deck going too quickly yet. This turn I think is pretty straightforward. We can see, thanks to Vegeta taking those 2 cards, the Knights is actually available for 2 civil actions for me and not 3, which is definitely very fortunate. It means I can build 1 stage of the Stonehenge to get enough science to play the Knights this turn, and then build a Knight with my Boudica resources. Obviously, I don't want to spend my Boudica resources on warrior when my tactic is with heavy cavalry. I want to get them into cavalry. So things kind of lined up for me perfectly, where as soon as I needed to start building military, the Knights appeared at the exact civil action value they needed to for me to be able to build a Knight this turn. So Age 1 overall, I'd say, has been lining up very well for me. So that's some fortunate luck on my part. I think I still don't play the heavy cavalry. Yeah, this I think was a little cute. I mean, now I have the 3rd military action, so I think me potentially winning some colonies is a lot more feasible. And there's really no reason to keep this secret anymore, I don't think. Yeah. Anyway, I draw an enslave in a border conflict. Dragonite doesn't seed. Perhaps that's a sign of what this development is. Dragonite, and we'll see how Dragonite plays their turn. They play a Legion tactic and take 2 yellow cards, which makes sense because these techs aren't the most exciting, especially with having Zhone. They don't need the warfare, and they also don't have a lot of science, so they don't want to take too many techs that they aren't going to be able to play soon. Notably, what's notable here, though, is even though Dragonite's tactic is the Legion, instead of building a 3rd infantry, they upgrade an warrior to a swordsman. And I think we will soon see the reason why they did that. Foang finishes the Hanging Gardens, takes Ziska, builds the 3rd swordsman, doesn't elect Ziska yet. They're at least finally able to get the full Ashoka bonus going this turn. They don't have a tactic for Ziska anyway yet. Vegeta's season reveals the development of warfare, so now we see why Dragonite didn't build a 3rd infantry for the tactic. Is because Dragonite wanted to have a Dragonite saw with Joan of Arc, right? Dragonite saw that the top development was development of warfare, and so they wanted to make sure they had a free population to save 2 rocks on it, which makes sense to me. Of course, the downside is Dragonite could have been threatening, I think, 10 strength this turn instead of just 7, and 10 strength would have made it a lot harder for their opponents to defend. We all probably would have just had to, like, accept being vulnerable to an aggression from Dragonite, or at least some of us would have had to be. So that is a downside to the way Dragonite played their turn. I'm actually not sure. I mean, obviously, getting 2 rocks is valuable, but also, like, really threatening your opponents a lot is also quite valuable. So I think it's actually kind of a close decision. Anyway, Vegeta finishes the Colosseum, temporarily has 5 military actions until they elect Michelangelo in order to take the St. Peter's Basilica, which is a good one to pair with the Colosseum. With their last 2 civil actions, they build 1 stage and take the Code of Laws. Maybe taking a copy of Knights would have been better in this situation. Vegeta definitely is going to be at military risk pretty soon, and not having access to military technology could be really bad. So I think that probably it was more important here to make sure they had a copy of Knights. As for my turn, I seeded, I'm sorry, like I said, I'm a little tired, so I forget, what that card was. Anyway, I reveal the Uncertain Borders. At least, I was comfortable seeding because I'm not weakest. I said Vegeta is hit by it. I can use my Boudica resources again, to build a Knight. And now I finally play the Heavy Cavalry tactic. I think I still don't build the 3rd Knight. Well, I don't have enough rocks for the 3rd Knight, yeah, so. Instead, I just increase my population, take the Code of Laws. The Code of Laws is, I think, obviously always a nice card to have when you have Stonehenge to pay for it. I already have the 3rd military action thanks to Open Borders Agreement, so I think I can, so getting this 5th civil action with Code of Laws, I can pretty easily just live to H2 with that, so I think that's nice to have. And with my last civil action, I build on the Siege of the Stonehenge. Maybe I could have, you know, potentially waited a bit to perhaps get it with Masonry, to get Masonry to save a civil action here. However, if I hadn't done this, I didn't, you know, obviously can't take the Knights. I didn't really want the warfare with me already having the 3rd military action. I didn't really want the bread and circuses with me having a Happy Face from Stonehenge. I would rather wait for an H2 Happy Face solution. So I didn't really have another thing I can do with this final civil action than build another stage. I draw a Kidnap. Dragonite Seeds reveals Crusades. Again, I'm not hit by it. Dragonite decides to spend their turn upgrading an Alchemy. It is true that that's the only upgrade building available to them on the row. So, well, there's also an Iron they can take, but they can't. But 1 civil action more. They don't have enough civil actions to upgrade an Iron this turn. So I think I agree with this play. Interestingly, they don't spend the Breakthrough on the Alchemy. Could be a sign that they see the Dark Ages. However, it could also just be Dragonite being afraid of Dark Ages and playing around it. They also upgrade their warrior they got from Development of Warfare to Swordsman to get up to 11. I should note that I didn't have a free population for Development of Warfare, but since I'm going into Heavy Cavalry anyway, I didn't mind too much. Following elects Ziska, plays a fighting band, and is able to take Taj Mahal for free, having elected Ziska this turn. I think that is fine. And plays a third farm. Good with Ziska, obviously. Following is able to get up to 8 strength here, as well as notably 5 culture production. So Following is starting to get some culture going, especially with looking to prioritize Taj Mahal. I think taking Taj Mahal is definitely justified. Prioritizing it to this extent, I think less so. You want to focus on your economy first. I think instead of doing this, maybe taking this copy of Iron would have been better. They do take a copy of Knights. They already have Swordsmen, but obviously having Knights 2 can't hurt. Leaves them available for more tactics, including H2 tactics. Vegeta Seeds reveals Barbarians. Dragon Knight actually has the most culture right now, so it doesn't affect anyone. Vegeta plays that Code of Laws, also takes the Iron, and plays Patriotism to build a third warrior, and then adopts the Legion tactic to 5 strength, which with they have 4 military actions, so they need 2 bonus cards to defend Dragon Knight, but that's somewhat reasonable for them to have, so it might still be enough to dissuade Dragon Knight from warring them. But we can also see Vegeta having passed up that Knight's last turn. Vegeta now has no Age 1 military techs, and their wonders aren't really helping them with strength either, so Vegeta may struggle with strength going into Age 2. I finally seeded my Pestilence. I am, so with even though I'm going to be putting a lot of population into my military for the Heavy Cavalry, with my farm upgrades, I figured I should be able to have a free population available for it. I reveal the Rebellion that I seeded. I think another reason I seeded was to try to, well, I guess it doesn't matter getting it out now, but yeah, get the Rebellion out now. It doesn't affect me, of course. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect my opponents either. I am able to build a third Knight with Boudica resources. We can see Boudica provided me with a truly ridiculous amount of value this game, I would say. She provided me with, I think, seven rocks, because I built all of my Knights with her, as well as got a rock earlier on, as well as I think I took 1 science with her one time. So just, this was a really ridiculous Boudica game. I think she's really good with Heavy Cavalry. I also finished Stonehenge. There's a decent chance that the age will end this turn, so I don't want to leave this unfinished. As well as playing Code of Laws. And again, because there's a decent chance that age will end this turn, I figured now was a good time to replace Boudica, make sure I didn't lose that civil action. Isabella isn't a super exciting leader for me right now, but she's fine. I probably would have preferred, I definitely would have preferred Barbarossa, but he is available for the civil actions. I mean, this turn I could have used Barbarossa's ability to build this third Knight, so that might have been a possibility. I'm not sure if I considered it too strongly. I might have. It's been a little while since the game finished, but so that would have saved maybe 1 civil action, although it still would have cost 3 civil actions this turn. Yeah, so if I had taken Barbarossa instead of Isabella, then that would be it. I wouldn't be able to do anything else with my civil actions this turn. Instead of Isabella, I'm able to increase my population, which I guess I wouldn't have needed to do with Barbarossa, but I also choose to take the Frugality over the Breakthrough, which is kind of an interesting choice. I was a little surprised by this when I saw this in the replay. I guess I figured that, you know, even though I got this early irrigation upgrade back on turn 3, I haven't actually been able to upgrade the second one yet, because I've had to focus on first my lab and then my military. So maybe I just figured that, because of that, my food is starting to run a little dry, and so I wanted to supplement with the Frugality. Maybe I figured with Stonehenge plus the Alchemies, I would have enough science that I didn't need the Breakthrough. It's still kind of a questionable decision to me in retrospect. And maybe with all I'm really doing is less valuable actions, maybe Barbarossa would have still been better, although it would have been a little hard to get too much more value out of him because of how much I've already like increased my population and stuff. You know, built some units without him, so I maybe would have only been able to build like 2 units with him, maybe 3. Yeah, I think it's probably close between him and Bella. Probably taking Isabella was still right. Anyway, I draw Dark Ages, interesting, you know, card to potentially seed, and another aggression. Dragonite Seeds, revealing a cultural influence. Foang gets the most out of this. Dragonite, now takes the Masonry, as well as the Breakthrough that I didn't take, uses the Masonry to upgrade the second lab. Sensible turn. Foang Seeds, reveals a developed territory. I forget how much I put into this, but I think it's a pretty good opportunity for me to get rid of this warrior. It also, you know, the benefits of the developed territory are also pretty nice. Just in general, it's one of the, you know, nicer colonies to have. I decide actually to pay 3 rocks in a warrior instead of, say, a knight and 1 rock. So that's 1 extra rock that I'm paying. But in exchange, it means that I would be at 5 strength and 10 strength on Vegeta's turn and not 5. So if I had sent it, if I had sent in the knight, then I would have been the weakest on Vegeta's turn, which would have obviously left me vulnerable to strength events. So that's why I was more willing to basically pay an extra rock, because warrior plus 3 rocks is 5 rocks, knight plus 1 rock is 4 rocks. But having 10 strength and also just not having to rebuild the knight, I thought was worth it. Anyway, you can see, like I said, that Foang clearly values, you know, chose to finish the Taj Mahal over economic upgrades, which certainly gives them a lot of cultural production this turn, but I do think that probably wanted to do the economic upgrades first. We can see that Foang could have this turn done irrigation upgrades, instead done, 2 irrigation upgrades this turn instead of finishing Taj Mahal, potentially. So I think that would have been a better turn. Especially since the last civil action is just spent on taking reserves, which is alright, but not as super exciting. Yellow card to take. The disease reveals a vast territory. Unfortunately, because I paid 3 rocks into the developed, I cannot actually bid on this because I only have 2 rocks and I wouldn't be able to rebuild my 9 on my turn. So I sadly had to pass on the vast territory, and Vegeta is actually able to win it for only 1 warrior, so that's definitely very strong for Vegeta. Vegeta rebuilds that warrior and also does a mine upgrade and then takes alchemy, so this I think is a sensible turn. H2 begins. We can take a quick look at the overlay and the overall situation. In culture terms, Foang, thanks to Ziska and the Taj Mahal, has much more culture production than the opponents right now. So Foang could potentially start being a culture lead, although once Vegeta finishes the St. Peter's Basilica, they're going to get some culture production going too. In exchange, though, Foang has not been able to upgrade any of the economy yet because they prioritized the Taj Mahal instead. As for Vegeta, they've gotten a mine upgrade going. Dragonite has 2 alchemies. I have 1 alchemy, but also 1 irrigation. So I would say, other than Foang, everyone is maybe about equal in economy. Maybe I'm a tiny bit better, but it's about equal. Civil and military action, you know, Vegeta and I have 5 civil actions, none of the opponents do. However, I would say that Vegeta's major weakness right now is not having access to any Age 1 military tech. That might make it very difficult for Vegeta to keep up in strength over the next few turns, so Vegeta is going to have to find a way to do that. I would say, again, Foang's major deficit is the economy. Dragonite has a pretty well-balanced economy. They're just going to have to find a way to, you know, show up their weaknesses in H2, but that's very possible. I also think I'm pretty well balanced. I have this nice tactic going. I have, you know, some nice tactics. As I pointed out previously, there's a lot of reason to skip iron this deck and go into gold, but I could also maybe get iron on my turn if I want to. So overall, I would say right now, Dragonite and I are in the best positions because I think Foang and Vegeta have more unbalanced civilizations, but it's definitely not a huge deficit by any means. As for what I do on my turn, I could potentially see the Dark Ages, but instead I thought a better thing to have, because I have this open Buddhist agreement, if I do an aggression against Vegeta, I'll actually have 12 strength, meaning that even though Vegeta has 4 military actions, with a difference of 7, they would need 3 bonus cards in order to defend against me, and they've already lost 2 bonus cards to the vast territory. So I felt that odds are pretty high that I could get an aggression against Vegeta, and you know, maybe you could argue that there's higher chances than usual Vegeta has all these bonus cards because they decided to play it in such a way to to spend those bonus cards and be vulnerable to an aggression for me. But I think Vegeta's kind of struggling with strength anyway, so maybe they were just figuring, like, hope that I don't have one. So I thought it was worth a try at least, so I tried the Plunder as the less value aggression compared to the Enslave. Unfortunately, Vegeta did actually have those 3 bonus cards they needed. So I was pretty disappointed to see that, especially because it means that Dragonite can potentially... Both Dragonite and Foang can potentially get successful aggressions against Vegeta. So by doing this, I might have opened up both of my other opponents getting successful aggressions against Vegeta, which is not really something I thought about at the time. So maybe that was a reason to not aggress and push the Dark Ages instead. But it also obviously would have been nice to get to have the Plunder succeed, because then I could have upgraded both my farm and my lab. Anyway, though, after upgrading my farm, I only have 2 rocks, so this is the only upgrade I can do. The question is what else to do on my turn. I think I have a couple options. One option is definitely to take a copy of Iron. I think that would be justifiable. However, it didn't feel too exciting for me. It's going to be a late Iron, even if I do take it. I would only be able to start my upgrades next turn, and that's even assuming that I would have the open rocks for it. Maybe with Isabella, I would want to put rocks into a colony that I would win. Then I would have to wait even further on the Iron, potentially. I mean, I could take the Iron with the rich land, but that's also a fair amount of civil actions. But in this, it could still be fine. However, considering that there's both Watt and Railroad in the deck, I figured that coal is high enough value that at this point, with it being H2 already, with me not even being able to upgrade ions this turn, I eventually decided to pass up on the iron and wait for coal, especially since I have an alternative way to spend my science, which is to play this monarchy. Now, admittedly, this is also a relatively late monarchy, so it's not too great. As said previously, there's Robespierre in the deck for H2 government forms, and also 2 military action leaders. So Republic is definitely a viable possibility in this deck. So it's somewhat, not great because those H2 government forms are better than they usually are. However, I think that it's still a good thing to do. It kinda rewards me, right, for winning this developed territory because it gives me enough science to do that. So I kind of like that. I don't want to sit on... Generally, you don't want to sit on, like, a bunch of science and have it stockpile a lot. Unless you're aiming for a particular thing like a government form. But with me being able to just play the science right now, get some benefits, ensure that even after playing the Plunder, I will be able to get 3 draws this first turn in H2, which I think is quite important to potentially get an H2 tactic to guide you on which military text you want to take in H2. Obviously, the extra civil action helps too. With 6 civil actions and 4 military actions, I'm pretty well set for H2, and I can just focus on doing other things. I think that I still agree with this play. I do think the monarchy is better than the iron for me right now, for reasons already stated. And then I just take a couple yellow cards. I draw a wealthy territory, an inhabited territory, and a promise of military protection. Dragonite sees reveals a border conflict. Unfortunately, Dragonite wins this one too. Dragonite is able to use the border conflict to upgrade a mine. However, instead of upgrading the second mine, they actually increase the population. Notably, Dragonite does not have knowledge of the pestilence I seeded, so maybe they're just playing around the possibility of pestilence. Oh, no, sorry. No, never mind. They didn't upgrade their mine because they wanted to build another swordsman to go up to 13 strength. I mean, I don't know. Dragonite is strongest anyway, even without doing this. So I feel that upgrading a second mine would be higher value this turn than going from 11 to 13 strength. But I was also thankful to see that neither Dragonite nor Foang aggressed Vegeta. That was good for me. Foang reveals immigration that Foang wins. Unfortunately, Vegeta was not able to finish St. Peter's before it got revealed. Forwarding takes, after building a knight, takes the last copy of iron. And also, after playing a reserve to get space in their hand, takes frugality 2. That's kind of a lot of civil actions being spent to get this frugality. Maybe increase the population would be better, but it is true that they're starting to win a little bit of that. But, I mean, maybe instead of doing this stuff, they could start upgrading irrigation with this turn. Yeah, they could have, like, played nice and built the knights, and then taken the iron, and then, like, upgraded one farm, right? I think that probably would have been better than this frugality play, because it's more civil action efficient. Vegeta's season reveals the pestilence that I seeded. We can see this ends up being a very good event for me. I have that free population because I was prepared for it, but none of my opponents do. So all of my opponents are going to have to destroy something. Vegeta chooses to destroy a mine to it. Vegeta is fortunate that the Rifleman is available. However, notably, they decide to also take the Cavalryman, meaning even after upgrading a warrior to Rifleman, they will actually just barely be in corruption. So I think that while the cavalry, generally speaking, it's really important to avoid corruption for obvious reasons. Sometimes it is right to take, but you need a very good reason to. I think in Vegeta's situation, especially where they lost a mine and they have Michelangelo, so like they are going to be a little short on rock production, and they have a leader that really wants rock production. I think avoiding corruption is even more paramount for Vegeta than it is normally. So for that reason, I think maybe it would have been best not to take this Cavalryman, and instead use that civil actions to increase the population to get out of corruption, and then maybe taking a rich land. So I actually, as you can see, try another Enslave against Vegeta. I mean, I am second weakest right now, so seeding isn't too great for me. I think maybe the card I seeded was Call to Arms. Yeah, I think I seeded a Call to Arms too, probably, which is another reason why I didn't want to seed. And I figured, I mean, obviously I aggressed Vegeta last turn, took out all their bonus cards. So I thought in order for them to defend against me this turn, they needed to have drawn an H2 bonus cards. They hadn't drawn many H2 cards yet, so I thought that so odds were pretty good that this would go through. Unfortunately, it didn't. And this again made me worried that maybe Dragonite or Foang will aggress Vegeta. Although in this case, it doesn't really open up to aggressions. I think they could have done it even without me. This turn, I take the Coal. Unfortunately, I am not able to play the Coal this turn. I kind of, last turn I didn't have to play the Monarchy. I could have left Science open to get Coal going, but I didn't want to not play a Monarchy just in case of the possibility that Coal will show up early. But I was kind of punished for that play by the Coal indeed showing up early. I still wanted to take it. I mean, maybe I didn't necessarily have to. All of my opponents, I mean, Foang maybe could have taken the Coal because they haven't committed to Iron yet, but they can't be upgrading coal mines this turn. They don't have a lot of Science going, so it would have been a significant Science cost. But I guess it was possible the Foang could have taken it, but I think it was also possible my opponents could let the Coal fall off for my turn. And also, in general, I don't have that much I want to do this turn anyway, so spending an extra civil action to take a Coal when maybe I could have gotten it for one civil action, I think is fine, because civil actions this turn are less valuable, probably, than they will be next turn, because the card row isn't so great. So I think it is right to take the Coal here for those reasons. I think a much more questionable play I do here is to take Gotti. There's the reason I took Gotti. I did spend a while on this turn, because, again, the card row really isn't exciting for me. But let me explain my logic for taking Gotti. In the Australian Open... Okay, let me start it this way. In a normal tournament, where a 4-player game, the scoring is 6-3, 1-0, getting first is... The difference between first and second is substantially greater than the difference between second and third, right? Because you get an extra 3 points if you get first versus second, compared to only an extra 2 points if you get second versus third. So, let's give a toy example. Let's say you're faced with a decision, and there are two options. One option will guarantee you finish second. Another option will give you a 50% chance of finishing first, and a 50% chance of finishing third. in a, like I said, in a regular tournament where the 4-player game, it's just one of many other games you're playing and the scoring is 6-3-1-0, you should take the first option where you have a 50% chance of finishing first and a 50% chance of finishing third, because that averages out to 3.5 points, right? Because you divide them both by half and them two and then add them together. Whereas if you guarantee yourself finishing second, that's 3 points. So normally 4-player games, the scoring system is devised, I think, deliberately probably, to encourage players to aim for first instead of a safe second, because there's that gap of points between first and second. The Australian Open, though, is extremely different. In the Australian Open, if you get third and fourth, you're just out completely. Whereas first and second, there is a difference between first and second, to be clear, because each round, each game is filled with 2 players who finished first in the previous game and 2 players who finished second in the previous game. So theoretically, if you finish first, you only have to play one other player who finished first. Whereas if you finish second, you have to play 2 players who finished first in the previous round, which on average would be a more difficult competition to go against. So there is a reason to aim for first. However, if there's an infinite difference between second and third, and only like an arguable small difference between the first and second. So in an Australian Open, if you're faced with that same choice I mentioned, you go with the safe second place every single time, right? Just because of the way it's set up. And so for that reason, I think taking safer plays that are lower upside but higher floor, meaning plays that decrease your chances of ending first but increasing your chances of ending second, are always good to do in Australian Open, you know, if you can identify them, of course. So my logic for taking Gotti was basically twofold. First of all, if we look at the leaders, you know, we have 3 leaders on the row. If I don't take one of these leaders from the row, obviously I can't guarantee any of them will be available for me next turn. I mean, you know, maybe they will be. Who knows what my opponent's value, but I can't know that for sure. If I can't take any of those, James Watt, unless he shows up immediately next turn, I probably won't want it because I already have the irrigations, and I will be upgrading coal mines next turn. Robespierre isn't too useful for me. I already have Monarchy. Darwin I'm not really set up for because I don't have arenas. So if I don't get one of these leaders on the row, I'm kind of having to go for Maria, who could definitely be good, especially if I get the Ocean Liner service, but that's also pretty speculative that I can get Ocean Liner service. I'm also, you know, kind of going to be running out of a lot of food production pretty soon, so Maria maybe wouldn't be that great for me anyway. So for those reasons, I kind of wanted to take a leader this turn. And another reason to take a leader this turn, and especially, you know, Napoleon, I'm not sure when I'll be on more than just cavalry. If he only gives you 2 strength, he's not, I mean, he's fine, you know, he's still, you know, pretty good. 2 strength from your leader, any strength from your leader is good, but he's not, like, too exciting when you're only getting 2 from him. Catherine costs 1 more civil action, so I figured, and Gotti, you know, can give me more culture. And like I said, I basically figured that, one way that you can lose a 4-player game, that I've lost 4-player games, is like you focus on economy and military, you get to age 3, you're at a culture deficit, and you just don't get a way to make up the culture deficit. You don't draw any wars, or the only wars you draw are too late to matter. You're not able to get peaceful ways to get culture production going, and you just lose because you got unlucky with your military card draws, and you just can't catch up to a culture deficit. So for that reason, I wanted to make sure I had a way to get some extra culture going into age 3. I don't need to like get as much culture as any of my opponents. You know, we can see Foeing starting to break away a little bit. But it's not about getting like as much as them, but it's more being able to compete with them so that you're, you know, there's a big difference between like a 20 culture deficit, which is very possible to overcome, like a 40 culture deficit at the beginning of age 3, which is starting to look sketchy if you can't get wars going. Again, I think in a regular tournament, I would not take Gotti here because while I think he is a safe pick that maybe increases my chances of ending second, he increases my chances of ending second, he decreases my chances of ending first. But that's exactly what you want to do in Australian Open. So that's why I took him. I do think that logic is valid. That being said, I think in retrospect, it is still questionable. I mean, I don't really have that much free population. Who knows if I'll be able to get a lot going. I mean, he should still be, like, okay for me, but I think maybe Catherine... But I think Catherine would be a better leader for me. Even with me having 4 military actions, I'll lose one when the age ends, and also more military actions can't hurt. And also, she'll probably end up providing about the same amount of culture that Gotti will provide. And her extra ability can definitely be very strong. Gotti is one civil action cheaper, but we can see as a cost of that, take the opera to potentially pair with him. So again, I think I was kind of thinking of a future where maybe I could like build an opera, maybe get a team sports with him too, and just really get some Gotti culture going. That was my thinking here, but I think in retrospect, in a 4-player game, this is way too optimistic. So instead of spending 3 civil actions on these 2, I think spending 3 civil actions on Catherine, just to make sure I have her in hand, would have probably been better. And with my last civil action, I just increased my population instead of taking one of these H1 yellow cards. Discard my aggression, and I draw a prosperity and a bonus card. Dragonite Seas, Reversal Flurry. Unfortunately, I'm not... Oh, yeah. Another thing I forgot to mention is I could have built a knight this turn, and I did consider it. However, I thought that we can see next turn, with the Richland and the reserves, I will have enough rocks to upgrade 2 coal mines. So I figured to leave myself open that potential, I didn't want to spend extra rocks on the knights. However, we can see, obviously, the flurry was revealed, and so if I had built the knights, I would have had more strength than foeing, and I would have been in on the foray. So the knight basically would have been a free knight. Obviously, I didn't know the foray was on the deck, but I do think that, like, in general, like, going from 3rd strongest to 2nd strongest is, pretty significant, is significant enough. I mean, that, obviously the event could have been in the deck, it was, so I do think that, like, while this is somewhat hindsight bias, building the 4th knight probably still would have been good. It also would have made me more flexible in colony bidding. Anyway, we can see that Dragonite had to lose a swordsman because of the Pestilence, so Pestilence putting in a lot of work for me. Dragonite is able to rebuild the swordsman, though, and also upgrade a mine. To both mines thanks to the rich land, and then with their last civil action, takes an urban growth. Interestingly, chooses to take urban growth instead of Napoleon, though it is true, as stated previously, Napoleon with only 2 strength isn't too exciting. Maybe Dragonite isn't clear when they'll be able to get additional unit types going. Following Seeds reveals a strategic territory. This one I was willing to put a fair amount into. We can see I end up actually putting 2 knights into it. Because I'm still going to be able to upgrade a coal even while doing this. So I felt that it was worth it. Even though I'm spending 2 units on it, maybe... Or... Right, sorry, I only have to spend 1 unit on it along with 1 rock. So yeah, I think this was definitely good. I'm not sure if I was willing to put 3 rocks into it. I think I was. Anyway, off of the colony, I draw an aggression. I think this is a plunder, as well as an international negotiations and a freedom of movement. Foang, what did Foang lose to Pestilence? A farm. They had 3, so that makes sense. Foang builds a 2nd knight and plays a Phalanx tactic, putting them up to 16 strength, making them strongest, and they're able to upgrade 1 farm. And Foang chooses to take Napoleon. I think Napoleon is a good leader for them. They know they have 2 unit types going at least, so. Vegeta offers an international trading agreement to Dragonite. Unfortunately, not for me, but that's... It does seem like Dragonite... Well, Dragonite is the most in need of food of all of us, so Vegeta figured Dragonite was the most likely to accept that pact, I assume. As for Vegeta's sake, after upgrading their last mine, they decided to take a selective breeding and a breakthrough. They definitely need science, so that makes sense. They are filling up their hand, though, but it is true these cards are all really good for them, and they'll be able to get rid of the breakthrough next turn, so I think that's fine. I don't see it. I'm the weakest, and I have another good option I can do with my politics face, which is offer this pact. the Promise of Military Protection is a pretty interesting pact. Especially in a 4-player game, you do want to have the strength of it, I think. The 4 strength is going to help me a lot to compete with Jagadai and Foang. The reason I offered it to Vegeta is because Vegeta is almost certainly going to be the weakest regardless. So I figured Vegeta should be fine giving me the 4 strength, because it's not really going to make a difference as to whether or not I'm stronger than them. And obviously giving me, and it also incentivizes me not to aggress Vegeta, because then I'll lose this bonus 4 strength. So that's why I offered it to Vegeta, and I assume those are the reasons why Vegeta accepted the pact. Also give Vegeta a bit of extra culture, of course. I rebuild my knight. Oh yeah, I guess that 5 is actually the maximum I was willing to bid, because, well, I could have spent 3 rocks in the colony and then played reserves to upgrade the coal mine. So anyway, but I am glad that I'm able to just upgrade the coal mine like this, especially because with my last 4, that leaves me with 4 extra civil actions open to take the ocean liner service. I have posted a little bit, I wouldn't call like anti-ocean liner service posts, but like, I admit that I do think the ocean liner service is a tiny bit overrated. Maybe I'm wrong though. Obviously it's a really good wonder. I just feel that if you get it late, like if you get it at the end of age 2 and you only complete it in the age 3, then I think it's like fine, but it's not like super duper exciting. That being said, I think an early ocean liner service that you can finish in age 2 is extraordinarily powerful, so I was definitely willing to take it even for this amount of civil actions. But also I didn't, first copy of cannons, but didn't have tactic for it. I didn't really want any of these other cards, so we can see that Catherine actually ended up being available for me in 1 civil action this turn, so yeah, taking Agadi didn't work out for me. Of course I didn't know that she would be available for me this turn, but still. As for which cards to keep, I can only keep 3, and I think because I obviously can't guarantee if I see the colony that I'll still have Isabella, I think I discarded both of my colonies because I don't have any bonus cards in my hand. No way of knowing if I'll get like the navigation or something. I think I also discard the freedom of movement because the only real thing I could use on the freedom of movement would be my temple, but I would like to keep my temple around for Gotti. So for those reasons, I think I keep my other events. Yeah. Oh, I guess I also discarded the prosperity. Yeah, I discarded the prosperity because I have ocean liner service. So I figured that the extra food would be more valuable to my opponents than to me. I kept the wealthy territory. I'll have free population to rebuild with the ocean liner service, so maybe if I see that, I'll be better able to rebuild after than my opponent, so I'll be able to, compete for it nicely, because they won't bid as much for it, perhaps. And I draw a bonus card and a popularization of science. Dragonite takes a Kanmon as soon as it appears, but that makes sense. Both aside from me, the 2 other opponents are also waiting for an H2 government form, so they definitely need to prioritize taking it. Unfortunately, that does cost them almost all their civil actions, and with the last one, all they can do is take a copy of Richland for some future farm upgrades. But it's also true that they don't really have that much else to do with their civil actions anyway, so this is probably the right play. I'm forgetting a little bit. I need to get my second wind. Alright. Foang declares a war over territory on Vegeta. Vegeta's lack of strength that we're mentioning continuing to come back to bite them. Foang builds 4th swordsman and plays in Poland, going up to 22 strength, a fair amount at this point in the game. And they also are able to take an engineering genius and a frugality after playing the iron. They choose not to take the wave of nationalism, but that makes sense because it's not clear when it could possibly be useful for them with Napoleon. Foang does choose to play this very late iron instead of, say, for example, waiting for coal, but I think it might have been hard to save up the science for coal. Well, they could have played the coal next turn, perhaps. But they also wouldn't have been able to upgrade the coal mine next turn. Anyway, Vegeta decides to play the cavalryman and build a cavalryman. And then, after taking selective breeding, reserves a bit of nationalism, adapts the phalanx tactic to get a little bit of extra strength going. Unfortunately, doing this means that since Vegeta had to fill their hand, they now merely have to float their final silver action. For that reason, I think that playing the Cavalryman this turn was a mistake. Switching to Phalanx instead of Legion only pushes, instead of like say like opening Warriors or putting Riflemen or something, only puts Vegeta up an extra strength, and that will not actually make a difference to the war, right? The breakpoints of the war of a territory are every 5 strength. So if Vegeta isn't getting up to 13, like 13 strength and 8 strength, any strength value between 8 and 13 are equivalent in terms of this war and territory. Maybe, however, this is required that Vegeta felt they needed to do this to protect from an aggression from me, for example. I have certainly shown myself more than willing to try aggressions against Vegeta this game. Still, following a civil action is painful, and it might have been better to, instead of spending their science on Cavalryman, spending their science on selective breeding or alchemy, and getting those upgrades going. It's my turn. I decided to see the Dark Ages. I figured that, you know, if I want to get in the deck, it has to be soon. It has to be before the age ends. I also figured that I should know exactly when it'll come out, so it'll be easier, perhaps, for me to prepare it than my opponents. I reveal Kata Arms, because I think I probably suited this, although, actually, maybe I guess it was in the next event deck, so maybe I didn't. Anyway, thankfully, I'm ahead of Dragonite, so that doesn't affect me. Although, it's not, you know, it's not the worst thing to draw an Age 2 military card outfit. Anyway, I take an efficient upgrade for my 3rd coal. I decided to prioritize the coal over the alchemy, though, notably. That maybe was a mistake. I'm definitely going to have a lot of coal going, so maybe I should have prioritized getting extra science going with the alchemy upgrade. However, I do have a lot of rocks I need to spend over the following turns on my coal upgrades, on this alchemy, on the ocean liner service, so maybe this will also let me, for example, finish the ocean liner service a turn earlier. Kinda hard to say. This time I decided to take the cannons, just a good tech to have for 1 civil action. I haven't drawn an Age 2 tactic yet, so it leaves myself open for potentially mobile artillery, maybe even fortifications. And then I just upgrade, increase population 3 times. This does leave me vulnerable to a potential Happy Face event, but I didn't want any of these other cards. I didn't want to take one of these yellow cards for 3 civil actions. So I decided to just do a civil action efficient play, get rid of my food. I think, oh yeah, I think I don't have knowledge of rats either. Yeah, I definitely don't have knowledge of rats. So this also plays around rats. I just got popularization of science. Just figuring, you know, I guess maybe I should have kept it and just got the freedom of movement just for previously explained reasons that I want to keep my tempo around. So maybe that would have been better because popularization of science is at least a seedable event that I could do if I just want to seed something. With freedom of movement, maybe I don't want to seed. Anyway, I draw a Ravages of Time, a Conquistador's tactic, at least even though it's the worst H2 tactic, it's at least one of them, as well as an autonomous territory. Dragonite plays the Conmon, takes Maria, looks to be good with them, especially since they have Statue of Liberty, so they'll have extra yellow tokens from this, they have the extra food income from the International Trade Agreement, so Maria definitely could be a very good leader for them. And in fact, this turn they're able to finish the Statue of Liberty, which is definitely nice. However, that uses up all their civil actions, and they're still in corruption. And this turn, all of the Statue of Liberty is really giving them is to culture. So, for that reason, I think that increasing the population, maybe, I mean, it doesn't take a look at Dragonite too closely. Maybe they had no good way to get out of corruption anyway, so this was still the best option. Folang gets 3 yellow tokens from Vegeta. That's definitely very nice. Folang takes the Republic. They have an extra military action from Napoleon, so that's good. They upgrade a mine, increase the population with frugality, and take a 2nd frugality. Taking a lot of frugalities, but choosing to do that instead of upgrading their farm again, that I think is pretty questionable. especially if they're planning on maybe doing a revolution next turn. They want to spend as many rocks as they can this turn. So I think I would have upgraded the second farm instead of taking this frugality. Vegeta Seeds, despite being weakest, revealing a Raiders. That, again, doesn't hit me. Vegeta plays that wave of nationalism that they took in order to get some more strength going. Now it's up to 15. Not weakest anymore, actually. And they play the alchemy. Unfortunately, they have no civil actions left to upgrade their alchemies this turn. As for me, I see the Ravages, revealing a Reign of Terror. So the reason I see the Ravages, I mean, Stonehenge uses up most of its value by building it for the science, for the immediate science. Now, it is true that the Happy Face is relevant, and you don't want to lose it if you can't. However, compared to my opponents, well, Dragonite, you know, if the Ravages hits after Age 3 begins, the Colossus will have used up most of its value. But I thought that maybe there was a chance that it could get revealed before the age ends. But I think it was mostly against Foang. Obviously, Foang has the Hanging Gardens, so Ravages could potentially be quite bad for them. It's also pretty bad for Vegeta, having the Colosseum. And again, as stated previously, your goal in the Australian Open is mainly to finish second. And so even if it's not, even if it's maybe, even if Ravages is maybe worse for me than it is for Dragonite, it's really bad for Foang and Vegeta. And so that, I think, makes it good to seed, because my goal, once more, is to finish second. And finish first if I can, but it's really all about finishing second. Anyway, I finally upgrade my second lab, as well as my third mine. I take the strategy, strong card, team sports, good with Gotti. And I think I play the reserves, and I build on the stage the Ocean Liner Service. Now, unfortunately, we can see my Dark Ages kind of coming back to bite me. I might have forgotten about it when I took this turn, and I forgot to check the event deck, which definitely would have been a mistake for me. But I was also, I think, just looking to get the strategy soon. And so that's why I didn't want to play another technology yet to play around Dark Ages. That being said, in retrospect, I think I definitely should have. I think this turn I could have played Gotti and Team Sports. Not even building a Team Sports, but just playing it to spend the science to be hit by Dark Ages less harshly. Oh, yeah, so I discarded the Worthy Territory, obviously less high value than the Autonomous, so I figured if I'm going to see the territory that I want to try to win, it should be the Autonomous. I wanted to keep my H2 tactic, and I also discarded that freedom of movement for reasons already stated. Oops. Inhabited Territory, I wasn't willing to bid on an Inhabited Territory because then I would be vulnerable to an aggression from Foang. On my turn, I drew a War Territory, looks like a Spy, and the bonus cards. Now, Dragonite is able to win the Inhabited Territory only for one swordsman, which is definitely nice. It does mean that they have a lot of yellow tokens going now, which is obviously good with Maria. So after building a cannon with the Maria resources and playing that defensive army to go up to 17 strength, Dragonite also takes a selective breeding and an organized religion, both of which are definitely potentially good, important techs for them. And they spend their last civil action increasing the population. Unfortunately, they did not have enough civil actions to get a selective breeding upgrade this turn, because they needed to increase the population to have enough science for both cannons and selective breeding. So for that reason, I think this is the right play. Foang Seeds reveals a strategic territory. This I was willing to put a fair amount into because I can rebuild relatively easily, and I also, I think, just wanted to maybe draw better tactic, and it's also just like a good territory in general. So I was actually willing to put, oh yeah, and I also only had to, I had 2 bonus cards, so I only had to spend 1 unit on this territory. So I think this was definitely right. Maybe I probably was willing to bid maybe not 6 rocks, but at least 3, I would say. And obviously here I'm rewarded for not having played Gotti last turn at least. Although I don't think I had knowledge of that strategic territory. Anyway. Foang, upgrades a mine. Notably, Foang chooses not to do the Republic Revolution this turn, although they could have. And, presumably that's because they really wanted to take this scientific method. It is the only scientific method left in the deck. And they certainly have science issues, so I can understand wanting it. However, it still looks like they'll probably do the Republic Revolution next turn. If they do, then on the turn after that, they will only have 5 science, and they still won't be able to play the scientific upgrade. So it's actually going to be quite a while before they're able to play the scientific upgrade. Sorry, before they play the scientific method. For that reason, I actually think this isn't a good card for Foang, because, again, if they do the Revolution next turn, which I assume they want to do, they won't be able to get it for a number of turns. So I actually think Foang should have just done the Revolution this turn. You know, earlier the better with these things in general. Vegeta Seeds reveals my Dark Ages, which unfortunately hits me as much as Dragonite, which is, you know, tied for most getting hit by. It also is going to prevent me from playing the strategy next turn, so this ended up being quite a bad event for me to seed, unfortunately. I do think it made sense at the time, but I wasn't able to, or I wasn't willing to play around it so much. Anyway, Vegeta makes sure to finish the Seed-Based Basilica before the age ends, as well as upgrading a lab, and then taking an urban growth to help with, you know, probably building the spread and circuses. I see. Oh, I forgot to check my events the cards that I drew off of the strategic territory. I'm pretty sure that card was the economic progress that I seeded, which I seeded because I am the player on coal mines. The card that I reveal is event that I reveal is Ravages of Time. This is definitely a very lucky event to reveal right now because it means Dragonite will not be able to get Colossus draws for age 3, which is one of the major benefits of Colossus. So getting the Ravages out now and not after age 3 begins is a really big swing. Anyway, as for my turn, we'll talk about the reserves in a bit. The decision I had to make this turn is basically, do I finish Ocean Liner Service or do I build a Team Sports? And I did debate about it for quite a while, but at the end of the day, I went for Team Sports mainly to dodge potential Happy Face events. Happy Face events felt definitely quite possible. Dragonite definitely could have seeded them. Foang, I think, you know, Foang didn't have knowledge of Ravages of Time, so they could have potentially seeded Happy Face events, as could Vegeta. So I just thought Happy Face events were too likely, and I wanted to avoid being hit by them, and I thought that was worth delaying the Ocean Liner Service a turn. For the rest of my turn, I can take this revolutionary idea. I am certainly running a bit low on science, so every bit of science helps. I rebuild a Knight, and after building 1 stage of Ocean Liner Service, I can, you know, be civil action efficient and increase my population. Now I can see why I take reserves. There's nothing else I can do on my civilization this turn, so I have to take a card. I could have taken patriotism, but I'm going to have a lot of military action with strategy anyway, so I preferred the flexibility of reserves. I could have taken the journalism, but I think that would have been way too greedy. You know, I'm going to be hard up enough building this opera anyway. As for the cards I keep, I think obviously it's going to be the bonus card and a tactic. So the question is only which other event I keep. I think that's also pretty straightforward. Oh, I actually thought it was going to be the Independence Declaration. But I think actually it's because, yeah. I mean, obviously the Independence Declaration could be really devastating for Vegeta. But I thought that at this point, because of all the strength events that Vegeta had been hit by, their civilization, we'll talk about them in a bit, but their economy isn't looking too good. I kind of felt that Vegeta was at a pretty serious disadvantage going into age 3. And so instead of playing an event that would kill off the player who, you know, is, you know, maybe they could finish 3rd, but I felt that, like, the other 2 players were bigger competition to finish 2nd. I wanted to keep the politics of strength just as a way to potentially be able to win it if I end up being strongest. Might be a little hard to be strongest with foeing, but I guess I thought with strategy, you know, maybe it was possible. Maybe that was optimistic in retrospect, though, and I should have kept the Independence Declaration just as a suitable event. I drew a war over territory into raid. Dragonite upgrades a farm, builds a second cannon, and a second swordsman to get 2 armies going to now become strongest again. Upgrades the second farm and takes an urban growth. Passing that up, I guess most of these techs they already have, so yeah, that makes sense. They can also use it on the organized religion. Age 3 begins. Foang does do the Republic Revolution this turn, so you can see if Foang already had done the revolution the previous turn, then this turn they could have done something like take railroad, take cannon. I think there are a lot of cards here that would be more viable to take than the scientific method, frankly, which again they can't even play next turn, probably. They do at least have the classic army tactic to compete more in strength. Vegeta Siege reveals a historic territory. This one, we can see, I actually bid a fair amount on. Again, the main reason I wanted to win this was for safety purposes. I wanted to ensure that I could finish at least at second. It's more important to be certain of finishing second than to have a shot at first. And so I figured the culture from this might actually be pretty valuable to me because it would give me sort of an extra cushion against my opponents, catch me up to them a little bit, and make me less reliant on getting good military card draws or good cards from the card row in order to finish second in this game. Vegeta decides to take James Watt and not Robespierre. Little questionable. Obviously, James Watt helps with the select breeding, but Robespierre they could use in order to do a Kanmon revolution this turn. I think that would have been quite strong. Instead, they do farm upgrades, thanks to Watt, which is also good. And at this point, it's a pretty good time to take a look at the overlay to see how the situation is going. In terms of culture, Foang and Vegeta are both doing the best. Vegeta has at least been able to maintain culture production. However, partly thanks to the historic territory 2 that I won, I am not too far behind them, only a little over 20 culture behind them, as well as Dragonite about 20 culture behind them. So the culture difference isn't too big, but the economic difference I think is. I am tied for most science production. I have the most rock production. I have an ocean liner service I'm about to complete. And my civil and military action situation is also looking pretty good compared to my opponents. So I was feeling pretty good. As for each of my opponents, I think Vegeta is doing the worst. Just they were hit by a lot of strength events. They were hit by that war from Foang. They're just they kind of went through this game a little bit. Their economy is decent, but definitely not good with only 5 rock income, 3 science income. Foang is doing better, obviously militarily. However, Foang's major weakness is definitely the science. They were not able to upgrade labs at all during ages 1 or 2, so their science is in fairly dire straits right now. They're going to need to find a way to fix that soon. Dragonite, I would say, you know, is still, just like in the Age of Age 1, I think Dragonite is, and me are both doing the best. We both have pretty balanced civilizations, as we can see. You know, I'm going to have more strength when I get the strategy and rebuild my army. Maria is certainly going to put in a lot of work for Dragonite. I think that's kind of Dragonite's major advantage over me, is they have a better leader than I do. However, I have more rock production thanks to my coals, as well as an ocean liner service soon. So I think I am, like I said, at least kind of like tied with Dragonite in terms of like we both have the most favorable positions, followed by Foang and with Vegeta last, I would say. But definitely, you know, anything can happen in Age 3, truly. So, still not clear who will end up winning. I do, however, want to rebuild my knights, my tactic, obviously. And then after playing strategy, I will at least be able to draw 3 cards this turn, which is important to me. And thanks to the reserves, I can do that while still finishing my ocean liner service. So I was willing to bid 2 knights the previous turn because I will still have enough to rebuild my tactic and finish ocean liner service finally. Finishing it at the beginning of Age 3 is still good, I would say. With my last two civil actions, I take the rifleman that I need for my tactic. Now, it should be said that the sacrifice this play makes is that Steve Jobs' computers could potentially be a very strong combo for me because whenever you have coal mines, I think Jobs becomes a lot more valuable. And also, if I do have a major weakness, it would be that 4 science income isn't bad, but it's definitely not great, and I would like to get more science income going if I could, which the computers would help me do. Unfortunately, if I took the computers this turn, I wouldn't be able to finish my ocean liner service while rebuilding my army. And I just felt that finishing the ocean liner service earlier was more important than even taking this powerful card for 3 civil actions. Especially since I have a really good card I can take instead of the computers, which is the rifleman that I need for my tactic, or potentially to copy the classic army tactic. If I take the computers, I would have to pass up rifleman and wait for potential modern infantry, which might not come until late or something, so I didn't really want to play that game. So, for those reasons, even though the computers would be extremely good for me, especially if Jobs wheels, I do still think this play is right. I draw a bonus card, a War Over Culture, and an Impact of Industry. Good draws. So getting a war early is always nice to have, so I can plan to go military. Giant, on the other hand, is happy to take the computers and plays it. They can't upgrade computers this turn, unfortunately, because they had to pop twice to get enough science for it. This is at least a pretty significant civil action cost. Foeing offers me a military alliance I have no reason not to accept. Foeing takes the railroad. You know, not the best with iron mines, but maybe they can hope to get an oil going later, and that's just in general a good wonder. They also take a revolutionary idea for 2 civil actions. Build a knight to get more strength. They're not the strongest, and finally upgrade their second farm, as well as build 1 stage of the railroad. Sensible turn. Vegeta's Seeds reveals a crime wave. Thankfully, it does not hit me. Vegeta builds an arena with thermal growth and notably takes the democracy. I mean, it is, you know, Vegeta, it does certainly need a government form pretty badly. And they can set up for a revolution next turn potentially. So I do understand the logic on this. However, it feels really greedy for me. I think if Vegeta's doing this revolution next turn plan, which I do think is a good plan, they should have taken the fundamentalism instead, because they don't need more culture. They already have good culture production going. What they really need is to defend themselves. And obviously, the fundamentalism is a much better job than the democracy. It is true, however, that the fundamentalism would reduce their science production to almost nothing, so it is dangerous in that sense. However, they could have potentially taken the fundamentalism with the revolutionary idea too to supplement that science. So I think that would have been better for Vegeta. Although, admittedly, taking the fundamentalism and revolutionary idea would have meant, perhaps, you know, would have meant they couldn't upgrade the second lab. So, that would have been a cost to it. In my turn, I want to seed them. I want to seed. Impact of Industry is good for me. I reveal National Pride, presumably seeded by Vegeta. So this turn, I think there's definitely one card I really want, which is this first copy of Air Forces. I already have drawn a War Over Culture, so I would like to get military going if I can. This turn I could potentially build an opera to get some culture production going, but I think since I already have the war, and since I got this Air Forces, I think it is better to just start preparing for wars. Especially since I can also take this revolutionary idea. That is an important card for me, since I am also kind of struggling on science right now. And with my last civil action, I just increased my population. Normally, I did have to think about this. I guess I didn't have to think about it. So, yeah. I mean, it does mean that I'll have 1 extra food production going, but technically, yeah, so next turn I'll have 1 food. This will get rid of the following turn 2 food. My yellow bank would be here. Following turn 3 food. My yellow bank would be here. The following turn 4 food. So yeah, I guess I might be having some like food I can't spend. if I do it this way. But maybe I can get a copy of reserves or something to get an extra population out. I think it was mostly just, I mean, my hands full. I didn't have enough science to play my cards. By taking these 2 cards, I can't play Rev Idea and play another tech. So I didn't want to play the opera yet. So I didn't have anything else I wanted to do with my last civil action other than just pop. Those are keeping cards. I definitely want to keep this war. I want to keep the bonus card. So I think I just also keep the event to seed. Oh, sorry. I get to... Yeah, I just got the war over territory. If I'm warring, it's going to be the war over culture. And I draw a second war over culture, so I'm definitely being encouraged in a certain direction, especially with the impact of strength I also drew. Impact of science, probably not going to be seeded. Dragonite notably passes up Steve Jobs and Marie Curie. Both of them would be pretty good leaders, and instead takes Sid Meier. It is true that Sid Meier will give them a lot of extra culture, which is nice. But he's also just kind of a not great leader all around. Steve Jobs would have meant they didn't have to build the organized religion. Marie Curie would have provided her own benefits. They also are available for 2 civil actions less than Sid Meier. We can see that, well, Dragonite is able to build a 3rd cannon and then upgrade the labs. So Sid Meier does let Dragonite get this 11 culture production going, which is definitely nice. So I understand the logic for Sid Meier. However, this does mean if they took one of these leads instead, they could have taken, for example, the military theory, which also definitely would have been very nice for them. Foang does a raid against Vegeta, destroying both of the alchemies that they just built. That is pretty rough. But it's obviously good for Foang. They're able to finish the Transcontinental Railroad. They take a copy of military theory and an efficient upgrade. Yeah, they had to spend all of their military actions on that raid, sadly. But, I mean, I do think it is worth it. Efficient upgrade, they can use on labs. They're the late scientific method, but still, you know, better late than never. Better late than never, as they say. Got it? I'm starting to fade a little bit, but I'll power through. Vegeta Seeds reveals an international agreement. Foang wins it. Vegeta does do this democracy revolution. I think if you're going to take it, you kind of have to do this one on Vegeta's position, but we can see it's pretty rough for them. They're also in corruption, unfortunately, because they also use up all their military actions to copy the classic army tactic. So for me, first I see the impact of strength. I'm planning on building strength this turn and reveal my economic progress. So this turn was actually a pretty tricky one to figure out. Mainly because what I really wanted to do was set up a turn where next turn I can do a fundamentalism revolution while declaring war. Obviously, you know, with my plan being I have these 2 wars, I want to do a war-focused plan. Fundamentalism in general is very helpful for that plan, but it's also nice because remember Gandhi is in the deck. So I need extra military actions if I'm going to war a player who takes Gandhi, which either Foang or Vegeta is definitely incentivized to take Gandhi. So to make sure that, you know, Gandhi doesn't show up this turn and Vegeta takes it and I can't war them or something like that, I wanted to have enough military actions that I could war a Gandhi player. So that's the main reason why I wanted to get the fundamentalism and do a fundamentalism revolution next turn. And so I tried to figure out a turn where I could set myself up for fundamentalism revolution war next turn. And I managed to find one. So here's what I have to do. I have to play both the Air Forces and the Riflemen. Obviously, I need to play them this turn because I won't have any civil actions next turn. I am able to do that thanks to my revolutionary ideas. I build an Air Force this turn to get strongest. However, Marie Curie isn't also necessary. So the fact that Marie Curie is available for me in one civil action this turn is extremely important. Because, as you can see, I'm going to need to play Revolutionary Idea and Rifleman. That's going to use up all my science. So without Marie Curie, I only have 4 science next turn, which is 1 short of the fundamentalism revolution. So I need an extra science to do this. I could also get the extra science from Albert Einstein, but actually him costing one more civil action means I couldn't do everything else I wanted to do this turn. It had to be a leader available for one civil action that gives me at least one extra science. So it is certainly quite fortunate that Marie Curie is available for me to be able to do that, but I am also, you know, proud of myself for being able to find the line that lets me do this. We can see I take the fundamentalism, and now I use up all my civil actions to also play Rev Idea as well as the Rifleman. And I go ahead and you know, spend another military action to build the Rifleman. Actually, I think I need to, you know, I want to spend as many military actions as I can because obviously I'm warring next turn. So I spend a second Rifleman. Another thing that I had to figure out what to do is whether I wanted to play my Conquistadors or copy the Classic Army tactic. It's not as straightforward as it might seem. I think what I ended up figuring out was next turn I would be able to threaten a bit more strength with the Conquistadors because I'm not able to get 2 Classic Army tactics next turn because I'm only, with Ocean Alliance Service, I'm only going to have 2 free population, so I'm going to be 1 pop short of getting a full Classic Army tactic going. So the Conquistadors, I would be able to get 2 Conquistadors tactics going, so it would be more powerful next turn. However, long term, the Classic Army is better, obviously, because it offers more strength. The Conquistadors, to get more strength than Classic Army, I would need to get 3 Conquistador tactics going, which, you know, is 1 more pop than 2 Classic Army tactics, but that 1 pop makes a difference. It was looking not too feasible. So I figured that Classic Army is just a more balanced tactic. I would rather operate off of that for the full game, even if it means slightly less strength next turn. As for cost to keep, I definitely want to keep my 2 wars and my bonus card. I think I just got the impact of science because, again, you know, Dragon Knight has computers. It's not clear if I'll be able to get more science production going ever, especially with my fundamentalism. So yeah, I think I definitely just got the impact of science and my Conquistadors since I'm operating off of Classic Army, and that should be... well, I actually keep the impact of science and just got the bonus card. Okay, yeah, that makes sense because I'm gonna be going all wars all the time now, so even if future colonies are revealed, I will almost certainly not want to bid on them because I don't want to lose units to them. So for that reason, the bonus card felt irrelevant to me. And whereas the impact of science, I mean, maybe if I could get computers or something, I might be able to get impact of science going. Dragon Knight is able to get the military theory this turn at least. Builds 2 more swordsmen to get 3 defensive army tactics going to go up to 44 strength. And also takes movies. This is ambitious, I think, because I'm clearly threatening war. However, maybe Dragon Knight figures I'm more likely to war Vegeta than them, and so getting a way to get even more cultural production going to at least ensure second might be attractive to them. And then I still think it's pretty ambitious. They can always just build a third computer to get more cultural production going. So I think maybe that civil action could have been better spent otherwise, for example, on this copy of reserves or maybe getting out of corruption. We can see here the weakness of Dragon Knight getting these 2 farm upgrades with all these yellow tokens. They were obviously helpful for Maria, but now Dragon Knight is running out of civil actions to increase the population enough times, so now that food is starting to build up uselessly and costing them corruption. It's obviously hard to tell that this is the eventuality that might result, but this can definitely happen when you have tons of yellow tokens like Dragon Knight did, along with selective breedings. So, in retrospect, upgrading maybe just 1 selective breeding would have been better. Or maybe even just skipping the selective breeding altogether, frankly, due to the international treaty agreement. Anyway, Foang takes computers and a revolutionary idea with the international agreement, and that just reveals the second copy of Air Forces, which Foang, I'm sure, was very happy to get. The other things they do is they're able to finally get science production going with computers, so now their science production is looking quite good. And they're also able to complete the second Classic Army tactic. They got to 44 strength as well. And they can even take a military build-up. So this was definitely a strong term from Foang. I do wonder if maybe the reserves would have been better as being more flexible. The military build-up, probably getting up to 9 would be quite ambitious. Maybe the best they could hope for is 6, in which case it's not that much better than reserves. However, this is also, you know, a denial to Vegeta as well. Maybe that was part of the decision-making. Vegeta doesn't see, instead they take an oil. It is true oil strong with James Watt. However, I also think this was pretty ambitious. Vegeta is extremely vulnerable to wars right now, but maybe they figure their economy is bad enough, especially after that raid, that their best bet is just kind of hope that their opponents don't war them. They do, another reason is that in order to even play the oil next turn, they need to spend 12 rocks to rebuild both labs, and those are rocks that cannot go into the military. So I think Vegeta is just leaving themselves way too vulnerable, especially in a 4-player game where at least one of their opponents having a war is pretty much for certain. So I think they should have focused on, like, maybe this reserves or like some other things to do than spending 12 rocks on this. Okay, so sorry, a bit spoilers. I should have paused a bit earlier, but this turn was complicated for me, not because of what I'm gonna do. What I'm actually gonna do is pretty set, as we can see. Ocean Liner Service coming in clutch here. I don't think I've ever actually used it this way before, as a way to basically get an extra civil action when you do the revolution, making this revolution much better. And I can maximize strength by building a rifleman and an air force. I obviously don't want to have 3 air forces because I want 2 armies and 2 air forces. So my turn itself was pretty set. What I did spend a lot of time on was, which my opponents I wanted to war. And it was actually a surprisingly complicated decision. And let me explain why. The first instinct is obviously to war Vegeta. Vegeta, all they can do is build another rifleman or cavalryman. It's going to be a really huge war against Vegeta. However, the reason not to war Vegeta is because Vegeta might resign. So if you're not aware, and through the ages, if a player resigns after a war has been declared against them, so if after I declared this war against Vegeta, if Vegeta were to resign, I would only get 7 culture out of the war. So that's what happens when you resign. The player who launched the war only gets 7 culture, and not whatever other benefits they would have gotten. This is a somewhat controversial rule in the community. I personally actually quite like the rule, but that's a sort of separate conversation that I won't get into. The point is that in this situation I'm faced, I need to seriously consider the possibility that Vegeta might resign. And obviously if Vegeta resigns, that would be pretty bad for me. My culture is, at this point, I mean, it's up because of Gotti followed by Marie Curie. I'm able to keep up with culture okay with my opponents, but it's still, Dragonite has a lot of culture production. Fawang doesn't, but they're still ahead of me. They might be able to get other things. It's not clear. It's not necessarily clear at this point if I can overtake them without getting a lot of culture from Vegeta. And so basically the reason not to war Vegeta, well, one reason not to war Vegeta is because, like I said, Vegeta could resign if I did it. Another reason not to war Vegeta is I have that promise of military protection pact with Vegeta. So ideally, I would prefer to use the 4 strength from that pact to war one of my other opponents instead, and then war Vegeta after that. However, there is a problem with that play. So, first of all, Fawang has set themselves up to build 2 air forces. So I'm definitely not warring Fawang. There is a reason to war Dragonite, though, which is, as you can see, the air forces have just been revealed, meaning that Dragonite is the one who will get the last copy of air forces. However, this turn they don't have the science for it. So if I war Dragonite this turn, then I'll be able to war them before they can start building air forces. That's definitely very nice. However, there is a concern with warring Dragonite, and again, that concern has to do with resignation. My worry about warring Dragonite was if the following series of events happened. Let's say I war Dragonite, and then Dragonite wars Vegeta. Dragonite gets a lot of culture out of the war of Vegeta. Then it's my turn, I war Vegeta, and then Vegeta resigns. This was a very invisible... That I think is like a plausible... it's definitely something that could happen. And what it would mean basically is Dragonite would get more culture from Vegeta than they would lose to me. Now, you could say maybe that's fine because at least it would still be, a war against Dragonite. They'll give me extra culture to to measure up against Foang. But again, Dragonite can still get a fair amount of strength going even without Air Forces. So it wouldn't be that much culture I wanted from Dragonite. And so it might still be possible. You know, I would still definitely be an advantage to at least finish second, even if that series of events I just described occurred. But it would be a little scary, a little worrisome. So I was kind of, you know, going back and forth about who I wanted to war. I was like, is it just going to depend on like when I think Vegeta is likely to resign? It's hard to tell when players will resign sometimes. You know, some people never resign. Others resign really early. Others resign, you know, early. Others resign for strategic reasons. It's kind of different for every player. I don't think I've played with Vegeta before, at least not to my memory. So I really had no idea what their playstyle was like. But the final factor that convinced me to war Vegeta this turn, well, there were a couple. First of all, I did some calculations as to my and Dragonite's strength potential next turn. And there's actually a hidden weakness with Dragonite's position, which is, theoretically, they could get 3 Air Forces next turn along with their 3 armies by taking the reserves, because that would give them 17 plus 4, 21 rocks, which is just enough for 3 Air Forces. However, they can't actually do that, and that's because of corruption. In order to take Air Forces and reserves next turn, note that I'm not taking any cuts on the route, obviously, since I'm doing a revolution. So Dragonite would have to spend 5 civil actions to take Air Forces and reserves, and then they would not have enough, and then they would not be able to get out of corruption no matter what they do. So they would actually only be able to build 2 Air Forces next turn. And with that consideration, after I did the calculation of what strength I'll have next turn, because obviously I'll be completing my 2nd army next turn, which will also be get a double tactic with the Air Force, compared to Dragonite only being able to build 2 Air Forces next turn. The difference in strength between Dragonite and me next turn is actually roughly the same as the difference in strength between us this turn, even considering that if I were Dragonite this turn, I would have an extra 4 strength from Promise of Military Protection. So, because of that, there's actually less reason than it might seem to war Dragonite this turn, because I can still always war Dragonite next turn for basically the same amount. I also figured, you know, the first war against Vegeta is, you know, there's a good chance Vegeta won't resign. But it's going to be a really huge war against Vegeta, and almost certainly result in them finishing 4th. But they still have a fair amount of culture and culture production. They might think that they at least have an outside chance to finish 2nd, even after my war. But also I figured even if Vegeta resigns, then at least Vegeta will be out of the game. I won't have to worry about either of my opponents worrying Vegeta and getting a lot of culture from them. And I can just focus instead on warring either Dragonite or Foang, even if Vegeta resigns. So, for all those reasons, I decided to end up warring Vegeta. And like I said, my turn itself is forced, pretty much. I draw 2 tactics I'm probably not going to use. Dragonite sees revealing an Iconoclasm. Maybe this is succeeded by Dragonite, perhaps Vegeta having Watt. Either way, because I replaced my leader, this doesn't affect me. Dragonite, unsurprisingly, takes the Air Forces, but interestingly, they don't take the reserves. Instead, they upgrade a temple and take the Engineering Genius. I definitely disagree with this play, because as you can see, due to the corruption, Dragonite won't even be able to build 2 Air Forces next turn. They'll only have 12 rocks and can only build 1 Air Force. So I definitely think Dragonite should have found a way to play this turn so that next turn they can build 2 Air Forces. I think there were a couple ways they could have done that. Anyway, Foang gets an armed intervention against Vegeta. Foang decides to take the United Nations as a wonder, plays the military theory, so that they can get 3 draws even after that aggression, as well as a civil service and reserves. Unfortunately, Foang also has corruption in this. A lot of corruption in this game, at least among my opponents. I don't think I've ever had corruption. This game. I've had corruption in previous games, but not this one. Vegeta Siege reveals a civil unrest that only hits Foang. All Vegeta can do is build a rifleman. I was obviously very happy to see Vegeta not resigning. I think Vegeta not resigning doesn't cement me winning the game, but I think it almost certainly cements me finishing 2nd at least, and puts me in the driver's seat even for finishing 1st. Other than that, Vegeta just takes some yellow cards, which I agree with because they don't have a lot of science, but they also like the multimedia. It is you know, invisible. They have 9 science next turn, so they could definitely potentially be able to build this multimedia. With my turn, I get 40 culture, take 40 culture of that war. Really big war, obviously. I mean, 62 versus 27. But, you know, I have a second war, so why not use it? And again, Foang is still able to build 2 air forces their turn, and since Dragonite is only able to build 1, Foang can threaten a lot more strength than Dragonite, so it made perfect sense to me, I think, for that reason, to war Dragonite. I don't need this temple anymore, so I can just destroy it to get my 2 armies, 2 air forces going up to 83 strength. It kind of be noted, I think it's kind of funny that how much of my pretty significant amount of my strength is not from my units. I mean, most of it is. 62 of this is from units. But I have the strategy, I have my team sports, I have both strength territories, I have the fundamentalism, I have the military alliance, even an extra 1 strength from Marie Curie. So that's actually a total of 8, 12, 18, 21 strength I'm getting, not from any of my military units, which is definitely more than normal, I think. But I do have to choose this turn after doing this what else I want to do. I have a limited amount of science, so I only really want to take 1 tech here. And the tech I choose to take is the engineering genius. There's a very simple reason for it. There's a good chance that the age is going to end after Vegeta's turn, and that my next turn will be my last turn. You'll notice that I will end up with exactly 16 rocks. Well, I'm gonna have more because I take the reserves. But I'm going to have enough rocks to finish a winner next turn. But if next turn is my last turn, then I will need to take and finish the winner in the same turn. And in order to do that, I need this engineering. And that's why I took engineering as my tech. My other civil actions are just spent taking these 2 yellow cards. Because again, I'm not going to be able to play a lot of techs. But that leaves you one civil action left, with which I decided to take the mechanized agriculture. Well, I will almost certainly, I think, play the engineering genius. I mean, there's nothing else I really can do with my last civil action, so I figured that there's maybe an outside chance I could play mechanized agriculture, and maybe I'll draw an impact that needs food income or something like that. And I draw an impact of architecture in a hybrid war, yet another war. Dragonite sees reveals an impact of balance, not seeded by me, but I am at least pretty good at it. It's best for Dragonite, so it was likely seeded by them. As stated previously, all Dragonite can do is build 1 air force, as well as a cannon, so this is a pretty substantive what I'm getting against Dragonite as well. This is take an urban growth, probably for a 3rd computers. They already have an urban growth, but they're going to need to build a 2nd temple too. Foang plays the civil service. Foang takes Gandhi. Interestingly, chooses Gandhi over Churchill. They may be hoping to dissuade like an aggression from me, but because of my fundamentalism, I have enough military actions I can aggress or even potentially war them if the age doesn't end. So I kind of think Churchill would have just been better than Gandhi here. It's not like Vegeta is threatening any aggression. Dragonite also has enough military actions to threaten stuff against Foang, even with Gandhi. Anyway, Foang also takes the Pro Sports. They do need a Happy Face solution. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention after the Ravages of Time, Foang destroyed the Taj and not the Hanging Gardens, which definitely makes sense. Foang actually this turn finishes the United Nations, revealing an impact of progress. So presumably they're planning to see the impact of progress themselves and to double up on it. But the fact that if that's the case, then meeting the engineering is even more justified because it'll give me 6 culture from it if it's seeded. And with the last of actions, they take in movies. Vegeta plays the endowment, gets that oil going, 2 oil upgrades. Unfortunately, they aren't able to get that with Watt, so these oil upgrades are essentially only useful for potential impact of industry that was seeded by me. However, I do think that you know, spending even with the efficient upgrade, they're spending 8 rocks to get plus 6 production, which is not really worth it. Now that being said, Vegeta is able to find a way after taking Churchill, increasing the population together of corruption. Unfortunately, they can't elect Churchill this turn, but they do actually keep the age going, which will at least give them 1 extra round of production from the oil mines. I still think multimedia would have been better. Maybe it doesn't matter what Vegeta does, though. But yeah, I was surprised to see the age didn't end, but I figured, well, with the age didn't end, I drew that hybrid war, might as well use it. I am able to guarantee a win in this war against Foang, and also the hybrid war is quite rough for Foang because they have happy face issues. So I think I might as well do it. I mean, at this point, it doesn't, you know, after my 2 big wars, I will, you know, definitely finish second no matter what, and I'll likely finish first. However, it can't hurt to do an extra war, you know, guarantee that I finish first. Like I said, there's a small benefit to that in terms of, you know, on average, you'll have a more favorable next round if you finish first. But frankly, another major reason I did this war against Foang is to feel a bit more fair. You know, by doing it this way, I'll have ward once against all 3 of my opponents. Obviously, each war is different, or, you know, it's not, you know, totally fair or whatever, but it still felt right for me to at least lessen my impact on who finishes second a little bit. I build an arena. Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm not able to build the arena with the engineering. However, I thought that I really wanted to pop this turn because the age didn't end. I am, with my 5 food, that'll be just enough to be able to increase my population regularly. If I don't pop this turn, the next turn I'll just have those 5 food laying around. So popping this turn represents 1 additional population for me. I wanted to build the arena, you know, for a potential impact of happiness, stuff like that. Maybe even like this is an immigration that could hit me. And I also wanted to take the fast food chains because it's by far the best wonder for me. So with all those things I wanted to do, I did not have an extra civil action to play engineering this turn. That said, you know, the 2 rocks, I mean, I'll have enough to finish fast food chains anyway, so it's not a huge loss to... Oh yeah, I needed to rebuild this arena so that I would not be in uprising after my hybrid war. So yeah, all those things are things that I felt I needed to do this turn, which is why I didn't play engineering. I draw an Impact of Wonders and a Plunder. H4 begins. Dragonite also gets an armed intervention against Vegeta. They build a second temple, and they're able to, unfortunately, only build the alchemy, but they do take an efficient upgrade, so they can upgrade this alchemy to computers later. And then they just increase the population 2 times. Foang Seeds reveals my impact of industry, so Vegeta is a little bit rewarded for getting those oil upgrades in. Foang, we can see, yeah, the hybrid war pretty rough for them. They absolutely need to build this per sports, but that also is going to make it harder for them too, even after playing these yellow cards. They actually have to play all of those yellow cards in order to have the science for the Air Force and then to build the Air Force. And now we can see they only have 2 civil actions left, meaning they are not able to play the reserves for rocks and then say destroy something to build a second Air Force. That would put them in uprising. So the fact that it's a hybrid war actually means that Foang can only build 1 Air Force this turn, which is kind of an interesting cause-effect relationship. So, with their last civil action, I mean, they had to destroy the mine just to avoid uprising, and they decided to take multimedia. Maybe that's a denial pick, because it didn't really matter which tech they took. Vegeta sees reveals an impact of culture. This, unfortunately, is a bad impact for me, probably seeded by Dragonite. Vegeta plays Churchill, takes the internet as the only wonder that will give them any culture, even if it's not a lot of it. So I end up getting 23 culture from the hybrid war. So how much culture did I get from my wars in total? I got 23 from that one. I got 40 from Vegeta, I remember. And I got 30 from Dragonite. So that's actually 40, 70. Yeah, I got 93 culture total from my 3 wars. That's That's a lot. This turn, I spent a little bit of time thinking on, but I think I did find the best turn. So first of all, you'll note that I actually didn't see the impact. Partly it's because these impacts like aren't great for me, but I think another consideration was, again, I was trying to avoid influencing who got second as much as possible. But yeah, this turn, after playing the engineering, which will also help me with a potential impact of progress that we know Foeing had that they could have seeded, I can play the reserves for rocks, which is enough for me to build 2 farms, which both gives me more culture for fast food chains, and also gives me more production and consumption, which is very good for an impact of agriculture that could be on the deck. And then I can just finish the fast food chains for 28 culture, which is definitely a good amount. And then I just take some cards. Dragonite Seeds reveals a Cold War that unfortunately doesn't help me at all being revealed now. Dragonite, after upgrading the computers, builds an Air Force, potentially a sign that they could have seeded an impact of competition. And then they just take some cards, as well as play attack for potential impact of technology. Foeing Seeds reveals that impact of progress. So thanks to my engineering, I'm actually able to get more culture than Foeing from this impact. And Foeing just builds a movie for more culture, as well as plays multimedia again for potential impact of tech. Vegeta builds a temple in order to get a little bit, or scrounge a little bit of extra culture out of the internet. Unfortunately, they are only getting 8 culture from it. So before the last round of impacts, we can see, as I said, I got 93 culture from all my wars. I am by far in first. It's going to be basically impossible for me to not finish first at this point. However, all 3 of my opponents, again, because I kind of bored all of them equally, they're all kind of close. I mean, Dragonite's in the lead, but only 7 points ahead of Foeing, who's only 10 points ahead of Vegeta. So, depending on what, I haven't, done any analysis on, like, what sort of impacts might cause which player to win, but the difference in culture isn't too much between them, so second is going to be something of an exciting watch for us. So let's see what happens. First impact is Impact of Harmony. Looks like that was probably seeded by Dragonite. They get 4 culture more than everyone else. Next is the Impact of Competition. As I said previously, probably seeded by Dragonite, given that they built that Air Force last turn. They lose 2 culture to me, which again doesn't matter. More importantly, they get 6 more culture than both Foeing and Vegeta. So after those 2 impacts, Dragonite is looking in a much better position to finish second. The third one doesn't really change that picture. It's my impact of, or no, it's not mine. I didn't see this impact. Someone else did. I guess probably either Dragonite or Vegeta, who figured that I was gonna finish first no matter what. So they were just looking to get some extra culture from it, get the seeding culture from it. Dragonite's still in the lead for second. Next is Impact of Strength. This is my impact, but it is good for Dragonite thanks to that Air Force they built next turn. Maybe another reason they built that Air Force was because they thought that I could have seeded Impact of Strength. Gives them 5 culture more than Foeing and 10 more than Vegeta. It's looking increasingly likely that Dragonite will finish second. Next is Impact of Variety. This one I think was seeded by Foeing. It gives them 4 culture ahead of Dragonite, but they're still 21 behind. It's going to be very hard for, pretty much impossible, I think definitely impossible for Vegeta to finish second at this point, but maybe, I mean, 21 culture is a lot, and Impact of Population is not going to be able to get Foeing there. This indeed was probably seeded by Dragonite. They have the most population thanks to all those yellow tokens. They get 10 culture more than Foeing, 14 culture more than Vegeta, and the game ends with me winning by, looks like 91 points, and Dragonite finishing second with 31 points more than Foeing, and Vegeta unfortunately finishes last. Overall, I was, looking back on this game, I'm quite proud with the way I played it. Now, I did get, I think, lucky in various points. I think that the card row was quite kind to me in a number of ways. The event deck order, I think wasn't fantastic, but it also wasn't particularly unlucky. It was mostly the card row kind of lined up perfectly for me, for good things to happen to me. And drawing those 3 wars also helped a lot, obviously. But even so, looking back, I think I played well. I didn't notice too many, huge mistakes or anything like that. And I think, you know, like I said, I spent a fair amount of time on, you know, planning out my next turn with the fundamentalism revolution, setting up the fundamentalism revolution, and then deciding who to war. And I think I definitely made the right decisions in all those cases. And I think especially that turn of setting up the fundamentalism revolution, you know, I'm not going to say it was like, you know, necessarily a super hard thing to see, because once I got it in mind that I want to set up the revolution, everything else was kind of forced. But still, you know, seeing that possibility in the first place is a certain step that you need to take. So, even though I think I was fortunate in a number of ways in terms of card row and trying those wars, I'm still proud of how I played this game. I think this is one of the best games I've played, at least recently. As for my opponents, I think that like I said, Dragonite, it maybe wouldn't matter what they did because everything lined up for me so well. But Dragonite definitely, that turn that I mentioned, you know, didn't set up to defend themselves very well. But they did still end up finishing second, thanks to getting this cultural production going from Sid Meier. Foing, I think, you know, I did point out, I think, some mistakes that my opponents made, but Foing, I think, played pretty well overall. I think their main issue this game was just, you know, they went into Age 3 with a pretty good amount of culture, but they weren't that far ahead of Dragonite or me. But, you know, we talked about why they finished third. I think it's just Dragonite was able to find a way to get a lot of culture going in Age 3 that Foing never really could. Foing, you know, built this movie on the last turn, whereas Dragonite had the Sid Meier culture going for a while. Dragonite was also able to set themselves up for impacts better. Almost all of the impacts were favorable to Dragonite. So I think Foing did play well overall in most of the game, but I think Foing, you know, figuring out a way to more deliberately get culture in Age 3, maybe Foing could have set up a war. I don't know if Foing drew any wars, but maybe like trying to set up a war if they did, or some other way to get culture production, Foing might have been able to finish second. Vegeta, I think, was really hamstrung by just the military situation pretty much the entire game. Like I said, they passed up Age 1 military techs, and that really hurt them in Age 2, I think. They were weakest, like I said, pretty much the entire game. I think almost all the strength events hit them. Okay, not all of them, because I remember Dragonite was hit by a Reign of Terror, but most of the strength events hit Vegeta. Obviously, a lot of aggressions got sent against them. They just, like I said, because they were behind in military, that made it so that they were behind in economy, which meant they were just never able really to get much going in terms of economy or military. All they really had was culture that they were pushing, which you know, isn't enough when you get wars and aggressions against you throughout the game. So I think Vegeta needs to focus more, especially in a 4-player game, needs to focus a lot more in the military than they did in this game. Still, though, I don't think Vegeta played badly necessarily. I think Vegeta's individual turns, you know, I can always, you know, say some decisions that I disagree with or whatever, which I did. But I think overall, like, tactically speaking, Vegeta didn't play badly. Most of the plays made sense and were logical. I would say Vegeta's issues were more strategic, like I said, just not prioritizing military enough. Anyway, though, like I said, I actually, in last year's Australian Open, even though I made it to round 5 of 7, I finished second in all of my games, except for the round 5 game where I finished last. So, I was happy to finish first in this one with a pretty dominant performance, with a player I was happy with. We'll see if I can keep it up in future rounds. I do intend to make videos on all the Australian Open games I play this year until I lose, with the only exception being if someone times out, I won't make a video on it. But aside from that, we'll see. Even if I lose in the next round, which I hopefully won't, but we'll see. You never know what could happen in Australian Open. Until then, as always, if you have any comments or criticism, constructive criticism on either my gameplay or my video making, I'm always looking to improve in both areas. My next video, unfortunately, round 2 of Survivors Cup did finish for me, but one of my opponents timed out. It's kind of unfortunate because I think that was actually like an interesting game, but that's how it happens. I ended up winning that game at least, but round 3 of Survivors Cup, hopefully I'll be able to make a video on. But my World Championship games, currently I'm towards the beginning of both of those 4-player games, so I think I will be making some videos on like intermezzo games. I think I'll make a video on my most recent World League game too. So there's definitely games I can make videos on. I do want to make videos more consistently. So we'll see how that goes. There are no promises. Until then though, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.